Now, while technology can vastly improve social outcomes and solve a range of the most pressing policy challenges on the planet, it can also do immense damage if left unregulated and without appropriate rules and norms to guide how it is applied. To discuss this and more, please welcome to the stage the moderator for this session, Danielle Cave, the Director of Executive Strategy and Research at ASPI, and our panellists, Dr. Franziska Brantner, Parliamentary State Secretary at the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action, Germany, On Lee, the Chief Executive Officer and Chief Technology Officer at GDP Labs and the Chief Technology Officer at GDP Venture, Dulciana Somare-Brash, Executive Director of the Michael Somare Foundation and Development Specialist at DevCom Pacific PNG Limited, and Dr. Naoko Sugita, Advisor to the Director of the Earth Observation Research Centre at the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. Welcome to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Danielle Cave and I head up ASPI's Research Strategy and Executive team. I'm delighted to be here at our first ever in-person Sydney Dialogue. I'm currently based in Tokyo and I flew in yesterday to this sort of really incredible atmosphere here in Sydney, and so much work goes into pulling together a global event like this. Different people, organisations and government, so huge credit to our Sydney Dialogue team led by Beck Shrimpton. They're doing a phenomenal job. And they've built a really incredibly diverse panel of specialists to my right here today, with everyone travelling really far from overseas to be with us to talk about technology and society and sharing responses to public policy priorities. Everyone on this panel brings really rich and very different strengths to the table, and I'd encourage you to look at your pamphlet and flick through their biographies. I really have my work cut out for me in making sure I bring these different backgrounds and strengths out in the 1 hour we have, and we're going to be sticking strictly to time. They've already been introduced by Nina. Their titles are up on the board. As I said, flick through their bios. I'm not going to reintroduce them. I prefer to steal that time and pour it back into Q&A. Before we get into Q&A, I have 2 rounds of questions for our panellists. And I've already said to them on email a few days ago, I'm going to try to be really strict with time. I'm looking for 3 to 4 minute-ish answers so that we can have a big bank of time at the end for questions. And I would really encourage, I'll try to take 3 or 4 questions at a time. It won't be one-on-one. So I'm hoping to see a small line at the front here and, of course, media in the back, and to take a bunch of questions at the same time. What I'm going to start first with is I'm keen for all of you to focus and surface a problem, challenge, or opportunity in which I want to know more about the role of technology and the role of governments. And the reason I want to start here is that tackling today's major global policy problems and challenges and dealing with the complexities that we often expect governments to lead on, whether we are talking climate change, energy efficiency, space exploration, building social cohesion online and ensuring human rights, a strong and resilient economy with an industry that can capitalise on new and emerging opportunities. This is a huge basket of things, right? Really difficult to actually balance and achieve. And all of this inevitably involves making big decisions about different technologies along the way. So I've put out the challenge there to our panellists. So pick a problem, challenge, or opportunity of their choosing, whether you work on it, think it deserves more attention, very open-minded here. And I'm looking for 2 parts. So first, what are the key technologies and innovations at play here with the problem, challenge, or opportunity you've selected? So that's part 1. And second, what role is there for governments, whether it's looking at how governments can accelerate the uptake of new and emerging technologies? Do we need them to weigh in on more regulation or from a norm-setting standpoint? Do we need them from a major investment or policy development or accountability role? Or in fact, do we not need them as much as we might think we are? Do we want them to pop out of the way? So be as controversial as you'd like. I usually pick the person who's travelled the furthest. So Parliamentary State Secretary Dr. Brantner, that is you, and you've just arrived yesterday from Germany and you're off to Perth, I think, very soon. Do you want to kick us off here? And I'm hoping you'll bring a sort of unique climate change and energy transition perspective to this conversation.
Yes, thank you for hosting that event and having invited me. You know, when we talk about climate action, let me maybe first line out the German legal goals so that everybody knows what we in Germany have to achieve or want to achieve. We have to become climate neutral by 2045. And the EU, as our larger context, has set a reduction rate of 55% in 2030 compared to 1990 levels. So that's our ambition. And these are real reduction. So no offsetting, real reductions. And I think that is what is really key. And talking about technologies, of course, one dimension is the entire energy part. So it's about renewables. There we have, of course, a continuous enhancement of technologies. But the key in Germany was actually to speed up permitting and procedures. So that's what we have done over the last year, is really to make sure that the rollout is faster. So it was not necessarily in terms of, developing new technologies, something like they're continuously enhanced, but it was really about speeding up procedures. And then there's a second part of which is important to us, it's green hydrogen, which we're really much focusing on now and establishing the infrastructure, the production, the electrolyzers we need for that. Electrolyzers is a big area where we need to invest more. And then we have other areas that we want to decarbonize, so, green steel, green cement, and decarbonizing all of these industries. And the fourth dimension is circularity of our economy, where we're also developing many, many new technologies in terms of recycling of batteries, rare earth, etc. So there are many new technologies still to be developed where we heavily invest. And I think, it's very clear that we have a worldwide race right now in terms of who will develop these technologies. In the US, you have massive investments. In China, in Asia, 4 out of 5, dollars go into these technologies in Asia. So we really have to make sure that we're going to be at the front of these technologies, be it circularity, be it decarbonization of the industries, energy, digitalization of energy. So, I think there's much out there, much is discovered these days. We have very good engineers and researchers in Germany, in the EU, and we are cooperating with partners like in Japan or Australia on making that transition faster. And I think, we have a responsibility, and at the same time, I think it's one of the most wonderful jobs to be able to deliver to the next generations a cleaner wealth. And, technologies are a large chunk, a huge part of this. And if Germany can be proud of something, it's our technologies. And we want to make sure that they are there for the future and not for the past.
Fantastic, Dr. Brantner. I'm going to throw to you now, so we'll sort of zig around. Just as a reminder, I'm keen for a sort of problem, challenge, or opportunity. What about the role of technology and potential role of governments?
Okay, thank you for having me here. So if you look for the past 500 years since the Gutenberg, the printing revolution, the governments for the past 500 years, when they create policy, it's basically paper first policy, not digital first policy. For example, when I flew last night, I took a red eye from Jakarta to Sydney. I have to carry my passport. I have to print out my boarding pass. Those are all paper-based. We all know by today's technology, we can definitely change that kind of thing to digital. Last year, I gave a talk at the G20 for paperless while traveling. The idea is we want to make sure government to government can use API technology, talk to each other. Like last night, I have to fill in Jakarta, I have to fill in my name, and then I arrive here, I do the same thing. Ideally, that thing, you should just do it once, and it carry from airport to airport, even to the hotel. That will be the ideal situation. Okay. Now, the other thing that if we take it for granted today, this has been part of our life, passport. Now, if you look for the past 30 years in the consumer internet, what's missing? It's identity. we as netizens, we don't have internet passport. As a result, some of us have tens, even hundreds of username and password we have to memorize. Every app, every website, every government agency we have to log in, we have to create new one. Imagine if we have the equivalent of passport on the internet with single identity, we can log in anywhere in the world. Just remember one. Now the question is, how we do that? You know, since this morning we talked about AI, the past 3 months, AI, because of ChatGPT, it went viral, right? And before that, blockchain, and before that, smartphone, cloud computing, and so on. AI itself cannot run standalone. It has to combine with other technology. Blockchain cannot run by itself. Cloud cannot run by itself. So this is why I recently termed the coin ABCD technology. A stands for AI, B for blockchain, C for cloud, D for data. Because we know each of these technologies is very, very powerful, but if we combine them together, they become exponentially more powerful. So in the context of this identity for the internet or replacing passport and all this kind of stuff, the question is how we do it. The way we do it is we should leverage this ABCD technology. Now, if we look for the past 10 years or even 100 years, when the technology took off, become mainstream. In fact, 100 years ago, this thing called electricity used to be called technology, but now it's part of our daily life. We didn't even think this is technology, right? Now, usually it happens when the government gives a friendly public policy, the consumer is ready, the industry ready, and usually all this emerging technology will take off because of the economy of scale. It becomes affordable. Today, when we use electricity, we didn't think about how hard it is because you just flip the switch, you're done. You didn't even think, oh, do I need to save about this thing because it's so cheap, it's so affordable, right? So back to that problems that I was talking about, this single identity for the internet. Today, we can solve this with the ABC technology, obviously with the help of the government, not only a single country, but also working international, globally, that the way today, like my US passport has been accepted by many countries, if this thing happen, it will increase our productivity, it will improve our life, it will make us safer online. If you look, so many privacy issue and security issue, if you notice, mostly because people stealing our username and password. Can you imagine if you can eliminate the fundamental of this issue, then we can solve a lot of things. Right now, the way we are solving this identity is like a Band-Aid, basically. Afterthought. We are not attacking the root cause of it. So I think in summary, we need to use this ABCD technology with the help of government, setting a friendly government policy globally where we can collaborate together so we can solve this together for the missing of internet identity.
I like the acronym ABCD. So far we have different technologies and both of you think actually government has a very major role to play. Dulciana, can we move to you now?
Sure. I just wanted to start by talking about a challenge. I'm from Papua New Guinea. We just faced a general election last year. The importance of technology to an electoral system in a jurisdiction that's with a population that's growing exponentially, where data hasn't been given the prominence that it deserves. When you put it in a frame of the importance of our incredible and diverse resources in Papua New Guinea, rainforests, for instance, we trade carbon in carbon emissions. When you talk about the critical enablers, the conversation that's been had already here today is light years ahead of the conversation that we need to be having in a developing country like Papua New Guinea. So when you look at an electoral system where the importance of democracy and the rule of law are so critical to other conversations around the geoeconomics, the geopolitics, all of a sudden the importance of a domestic issue like our electoral system become a very, very critical issue for this region. We have new friends on the scene who are perhaps using an opportunity where we don't have the interconnectivity that is required to conduct free and fair elections. The inducements have been remarkable in the absence of the data that's required for the planning of security, for the planning of just the rollout of institutional procedures and processes, so that we can usefully say at the end of a general election that we have had free and fair, and therefore we are a democratic country, and the biggest one in the Pacific region. There are other challenges that we face where the requisite conditions of the enabling environment, particularly the regulation, in energy, for instance, if we were to invite new investors, our risk profile is too great. We would need to reduce the cost efficiency of energy, reducing the cost of energy from perhaps 40 cents per kilowatt hour down to 9 cents per kilowatt hour. But to have those conversations, we need the data to be able to econometrically model and financially model so that we can negotiate the terms on our terms. What we're finding at the moment is perhaps we're facing another a structural adjustment program, if you like, which is perhaps a dated view of the reforms that are now being imposed on us because of our internal, the constraints on our economy, our annual budget cycle. Again, when you look at just the conduct of a government, when you look at a budget cycle in Papua New Guinea, the importance of our development spend, separately our recurrent spend, so just paying for office space, paying for the wages of 129,000 public servants. Data is at the centre of all of this. So I think the critical importance of a jurisdiction like ours, education sits at the centre of this, because we can have as much data as we like, but we can't control and I guess the demand for democratic principles becomes absent. And I think if what we're seeing at the moment happen, particularly with social media, so our implements and our connectivity are smartphones, and so we're not even having a space conversation, obviously, just the basic and critical enablers. Australia is a critical partner of ours, obviously, in the rollout of 4,700 kilometres of undersea cable. There are also other partners that are now on the scene. And I'm sorry to be jumping around, but there are so many issues. But we're in a different, it's almost like we're stuck in a time warp. But we have become the playground for a geoeconomic and geopolitical push.
Yeah. You didn't jump around at all. I don't know how you did that, but you managed to basically pull together almost a dozen challenges into this big picture. So that was a fantastic contribution. Thank you for that. Dr. Sugita, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, I'm very honored to be here. And if you see the diversity of the panelists, I think I couldn't have imagined like maybe 15 years ago to sit on a panel like this. But right now, I can associate myself to every issues that has been raised, being climate change, importance of data, and also the role of the government. Now, I think that is where the space technologies front are, and we're becoming very accustomed to be contribution to the societal benefits. And today, having heard the panelists talk about space, I'm already learning a lot. And it's a very exciting time right now, having new players and going to moons and going to Mars. It's very exciting. But today, I would like to hopefully draw attention to one more important thing, which is the mission to our own planet. And especially that we're facing issues such as climate change. And I think Earth observation can play a very big role. And if I may start with my personal experience, when I was a very junior member, when I just joined JAXA, and I was sent to a Japanese delegation of UNFCCC, UN Climate Change. But I was very new to the topic, so I decided to ask the professor who was in the Japanese delegation, a very renowned scientist who was using the Earth observation data. And so I asked, Professor, can you tell me in 2 sentences what would actually happen if you, like, just arguing, you're using Earth observation data, which wasn't the case at that time. Well, he said that, Sugita-san, maybe in 10 or 20 years, Japan has 4 seasons, but I think we will only have summer and winter. And other thing he said was that Japan is hit by typhoon often, the hurricanes, but the number won't change. The number of the typhoon that will hit Japan won't change, but each will become very strong and severe damage will be brought. That was what he was saying. And I think that that's exactly what's happening. So what I thought that is, if you use those kind of like technologies, you can like observe and monitor, and maybe you can like predict and foresee. That's the power of like new technologies. However, having said that, it doesn't come in an instant. Some people think that if we have the satellites up in the orbit, we can take like these beautiful pictures coming out in a second, which is not the case at all. You need to process, you need certain kind of skill sets. And like for me, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a data scientist, I'm a public policy major. But the reason why I asked my boss, I'm right now leading the Development Earth Observing Dashboard with NASA and European colleagues. But I asked, why me? And she said, if you can use it, the other people can use it, like other people who's not accustomed to Earth observation data can use it. So, which is the reason why it's still very difficult, and you need lots of kind of resources and skills to be able to use those kind of satellite Earth observation data. So there's a lot of work, but at the same time, there's this very good potential that if we can use it rightly, it will contribute to solve many of the societal issues that we face. Because global, for example, climate change, it's really the systems, you need global observation to get the cause right and understand correctly. So that is one is the power of Earth observation. So that is one thing I'm working on. And it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. If we work with other countries and also other parts of like industry and academia, if we bring that together, we can have the power to maybe solve that and to use rightly for more informed decision for the policymakers, as well as to bring benefits to the general public.
And that's, I feel like that's almost the motto of the Sydney Dialogue at the moment. It's a challenge, but it's an opportunity, and it's really why we built the Sydney Dialogue. It's also, the partnership you talked about with NATO and European partners is perfect, because now I want us all to pivot to partnerships here. And I want us to talk about the value of genuinely well-functioning and even high-performing partnerships and cooperation, and I'm hoping we can get a bit frank in that. I think the value of these dialogues goes so far beyond the public debate and discussion, and it's so much about strengthening already existing partnerships and a lot about forming new ones. And on the sidelines, as I roam around with my 8th coffee, I can see those partnerships forming, which is fantastic. And what we need genuine cooperation between government, industry and civil society, and globally and regionally and collectively, the potential strengths of partners and allies has never been more important. And that's another theme that's already come through so strongly. But I also don't want us to pretend that partnerships are easy. I actually think they're incredibly hard, and I almost think that more fail than actually become successful. So that's why I'm really keen for the frankness. So, frank views. I'm keen to hear about where you've seen partnerships actually really work, lessons learned, and how we can accelerate cooperation in critical areas. There's a really unique, I think, audience here. We've got politicians, senior policymakers, business people from both large companies and smaller companies. We have civil society, we have media from Australia, we have global media. So in a way, I want to distill and bottle up some of your advice for the group here. And I'll do a little bit of light steering, and I did mention this to you before, but if you want to go, if you want to sort of throw my steering aside and not follow it, that's also completely fine. Dr. Brantner, I'm going to start with you again. I'm keen to hear your sort of reflection on Germany's global cooperation in climate and emerging tech and what you've seen worked. And given you're here and you've flown really far, and I know you have a quick trip here, especially cooperation opportunities with Australia would be fantastic. And I know you go to Perth, you bounce to Perth, I think, today or tomorrow. Tomorrow. So let's start with you.
No, thank you. And in general, as a government, when it comes to technologies, you can work with financial help be it subsidies or credits or equity or different tools that you can have. And then of course you can also make price tags like a CO2 tax, which are emission trading schemes which we have within the EU, which are also a very effective tool. And then you can have legal frameworks that help to push technologies, as you have said, or can hinder that innovation to come to the front. And usually you need a combination which is smart, that includes all parts of society, also the poorer ones, without whom you cannot achieve any real lasting change. So we are always trying to see what's the best mix of the tools in order to achieve the different objectives. And when it comes to different international cooperation, for example, with Australia, we're also working on aligning, for example, standards when we talk about hydrogen, green hydrogen. So what's our joint definition? What makes hydrogen green or blue or whatever, and certification questions. So this is where we try to work jointly on exchanging on best practices, on standards, etc. The EU is the framework for us. It's not a German definition, it's an EU definition. We have financial systems that we set up. In the German framework, we have a model, it's called H2 Global. So basically, because in the hydrogen area, you have the uncertainty still in the market. Those who want to invest in the production of the energy hold a bit back because they're not sure who's going to use it. Those who want to use it are not sure to invest because they're not sure it will be. So many questions. So what the German state is doing is sitting in between as an intermediary and saying, we take it. We give you a 10-year guarantee of paying for the price differences. And then we give it to the off-takers, and both sides with an auction mechanism, so to be sure we get the best price. So there we put in money, state funding money. And of course, we try to bring our business to work together and have successful cooperation on technology, on innovation. And I think we can do more of that, and that's why I'm here, so that we get more technology done. And I think one of the key aspects of our trip here, and I have a very strong German business delegation with me, is to see how we can, in Australia, use the energy, the green energy you have, to decarbonize also your mining sector, and use the technologies there, and then help us to get more resilient on our imports, which we are not these days. Japan has been much more successful in that. Yeah, you've been really learning from Japan, if I may say so. So these are learning partnerships. You have JOGMEC, you have institutions that have been very strategic when it comes to a more resilient supply chain. So, sitting here on this panel, we're learning from you. We just were in Japan 2 weeks ago to learn more about your economic security. So, I think it's a lot that we're trying to adjust in geopolitically different times. And trying to see how we can better work together as democratic states address these challenges together. And they're large, but I think we can work on them much better if we do it in cooperation and in a learning experience. And at the same time, I think we have to be very strategic and we are not allowed to be drawn back by all technologies, which is, of course, the daily fight to make sure that we will not be, because it's so easy and nice and brings a lot of wealth to some, that we will be drawn back by these technologies and do not invest enough in the new ones. And then we as democracies will be left behind by the autocracies, which have an easier time to focus on the new technologies and just say we go with the new technologies. And that's always a temptation in democracy, that you have locked-in interests that would like to keep the past as it is and make it the future. And that's what we're not allowed to fall into, because then as democracies we will lose out.
Yep, absolutely. And I think our Deputy Prime Minister this morning talked about that. A lot of us are in catch-up mode here. I'm going to move to you. You've spent 30 years working in the US. You're now back in Jakarta. I think you've been back for around 11 years or so. So you bring quite a unique perspective, and I want to know from you, how valuable are partnerships for Indonesia and the high-tech space in which you work? And in your opinion, where do you think Indonesia's tech sector should be striving to get to in 5 years? So what I'd quite like you to do is to imagine that everything's working quite well, government, industry and civil society have a nice partnership going. What does ideal look like for Indonesia in 5 years? It's a hard question, but
Yeah, thank you.
I have faith in you.
Yeah, the partnership is very, very key for, I think, especially in the technology space, everything moves so fast and getting more and more complex. You cannot do this alone. So during the first year, after a few months I returned to Indonesia, the first thing I did was I flew back to Silicon Valley to form partnership, the one that we think the company we can learn, also we can invest. So we do a few things here in our partnership. One is learning. We ourselves learn by ourselves, make sure we understand what we are looking for. And then the next one is we look for investment. We also invest globally, not only Indonesia, but also in the US, Europe, including New Zealand and Australia. And after that, the third one is we know we are not smart enough to do everything by ourselves. Even we invest in another company, we will not have enough smart people to help us. So we partner. So those are the three strategies that I use for my company. I happen to be one of the advisors of AI National Strategy in Indonesia. For Indonesian, for the AI National Strategy, we also collaborate with international company. We have people from Japan, Singapore, and UK. Many countries working with us because we can learn, everybody has their own expertise. So I think in this case, if you look, the biggest company in the tech industry today, they still form partnership because they know they cannot do this alone. Okay, so right now, partnership is definitely one of the key strategies going forward for the next few years. Now that I saw for the past 10 years, Indonesia has learned so much and progressed a lot right now. I think for the next 5 years, I would say this is where we actually will apply what we learned for the past 10 years to amplify and to accelerate the growth of the Indonesian as a country. For example, right now, under the direction of Indonesian president now for the past few years, almost every government agency, either they have deployed AI already in their agency, or they're planning and they're working on it. So AI will become mainstream in Indonesia. I think that will help our Indonesian growth exponentially for the next few years.
Thank you for that. Dulciana, let's move to you. Recently, we were both in New Delhi at the Rasina Dialogue, and you did this fantastic talk, which I caught up with again on YouTube, because no one was actually allowed to be in the room. It was like an audio or sort of YouTube presentation. And you talked about the uniqueness of Papua New Guinea, its development, the country's economic and energy opportunities. And as a part of that talk, you said PNG has a NEO sign on its head that says, "Pick us," which really sort of struck me. And you talked about that there are many issues that need attention all at once, a bit similar to what you said earlier. The absence of data, the need for processes, issues to address such as political instability and so on. So keeping in mind that sort of neon sign and that picture you painted there, how do you believe Papua New Guinea can leverage partnerships and technological innovation to best take advantage of that neon sign? And what types of partnerships do you think PNG needs in the coming decade that would best serve its interests and its people? What do ideal partnerships look like in the next 10 years?
Yeah, thanks, Danielle. The conversation that was had in New Delhi was really, of course, you know, that snapshot of who's coming to Papua New Guinea and on what terms.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to forget that a pivot is being had. I had an interesting conversation with my eldest brother 2 days ago. He spoke of the importance of for me, I guess it was advice, around understanding what you give prominence to and when. So in understanding a supply chain in cocoa, for instance, all the way from tree to cup, and if you're modelling out an entire supply chain. COVID has obviously taught us a few things. The war in Ukraine has put some cogs in the wheel for what we export. But if you understand a full supply chain in a single sector, you then understand the prominence and the importance of relationships and partnerships, where the trust should go with the most prominent, given limited resources. We're a 22 billion kina economy with a debt to GDP ratio that needs to be handled or stabilised. But going back to partnerships, if we look at what is our greatest internal revenue earner, first of all, it's gold, gas, oil, cobalt, nickel. If we understand what the market wants, we're then understanding the importance of the partnerships. So in Papua New Guinea, where the critical enablers haven't quite been established so that we understand the demands. So insurance, our risk profile is very, very high. The cost of insurance is very high, obviously. The rule of law is an issue. So for us, there are many different types of partnerships. So when the world comes to us and says, we're interested in your gas, for instance, we've been able to pull off some remarkable, certainly in the last couple of weeks, some greenfield and brownfield deals where we're retooling a big mine, gold mine. We're also about to establish, I understand, a greenfield in the extractives again for gold. So if we separate out what's our development issues and what are the important geopolitical issues, I think ultimately one comes immediately before the other. And so therefore, for us, partnerships are about the existing ones. A very important one, of course, is Australia, with an expansion of the relationship into areas, into non-traditional areas. So in those spaces, it is partnerships with the Catholic Church. It is partnerships with private sector, very, very importantly, when we look at technology and the importance of what we're trying to do as a government, where a master plan exists for the digitisation, e-commerce platform, e-government platforms, the importance of education. So there are lots of moving parts, but for ourselves, it's important to be present in these rooms and having these conversations so we can see accurately where it all falls. Working together with governments in many southern jurisdictions is never straightforward. But I think for us, if we understand the critical importance of what we need to take to market to improve our GDP, to improve our social development indicators, and therefore our human rights issues, we then understand the 4 or 5 different pillars and where those important partnerships should fall.
Oh, fantastic. Dr. Sugita, let's end with you. Okay. Then we're going to go to the crowd and ask for Q&A. If people are a bit shy and a bit flat because it's been a while between caffeine hits, I'm not against picking names of people I know who are in the crowd. I reckon I know 40 to 50 people's names in this crowd, and I'm just going to throw them out there. So I really would like a couple of you to come down. And I can see blondes more than others, so if you're blonde, you're in trouble. I would really like people to start coming down in a couple of minutes. I want this to be a dialogue and a discussion. We've got such a diverse and fantastic panel here with such depth. It would be a shame not to hit them up with a bunch of questions. But let's finish off with you. Okay. I'm keen for honest views from you on how Japan engages and partners on space, technology and Earth observation. What does it do well? What could it do better? What opportunities do you see over the next few years for Japan and its partners? The Quad being one I'm particularly interested in, as you know. And how can they best take advantages of innovations and emerging tech in areas such as climate? So look, it's an awful lot, but
thank you for the question. It's very important. And I would like to maybe elaborate more on Earth observing dashboard that I have just mentioned. If you just Google this Earth observing dashboard, you can immediately get it. And it's a storytelling dashboard with 7 themes. So anyone can look at that and take a look at and understand what we have found between NASA, European Space Agency, and JAXA using the satellite Earth observation in a very easy storytelling way. And if you need the data, you can download it in CSV. So it's very easy to be accessible. So accessibility was what we thought important. And we did this under COVID. Because we had a very good long-term relationship with NASA and European Space Agency. We didn't have any single meeting, real meeting, but we made that through virtual meetings, and that was possible with the long-term relationships. But having said that, this incorporates like new technologies such as ABCD technology, AI. AI we haven't really incorporated, but I think AI is one of the areas that we can incorporate. But we're using, in this Earth observing dashboard, we're using cloud, which was not possible in like 10 or 20 years ago. Right now, if you have cloud, you can easily use it. Any people who have PC can use the Earth observing data. So that's some kind of a new development. But at the same time, if you want to take leverage from those new developments, new partnership is important, especially like international cooperation, of course, but also in domestic side, we have set up a consortium of Earth observing satellite within Japan to collaborate with academia, public, and also private to make most use of the technology. So that we started to work on. So that is something new. And just jumping around to talking of Quad.
Yes, please.
Yes, because I think it's of interest. We've just last month, we held a workshop called Tackling Extreme Precipitation Events workshop in Indo-Pacific region. It utilized our satellites, meteorological satellites, and also our very easy, this is also a precipitation mapping of, there's this called GS map. Anyone can use it. You can see the rainfalls, global rainfalls, and an hourly updated basis. So we did a workshop on that Quad workshop, and so you can be prepared for an extreme event. So anyone can use that tool. So that's kind of cooperation that we are seeing. And we hope that not only it will benefit Japan, but if we tackle on the societal issues, it will benefit the whole region. So
just on Quad space cooperation, is that quite a new area, or has that sort of been going, has that been ticking along quietly for years?
I think it was established in Quad Leaders Summit in September 2021. So this workshop has been initiated as a result of that one. So would you say that new or old? But I think space is really coming
into its own, isn't it?
That's right.
And you can see that at this conference has been sort of carefully intertwined by Rebecca Shrimpton, who leads the Sydney Dialogue, into lots of our panels.
Right.
Now, I'm going to move to Q&A, and as I said, not against throwing some names out here. I'm hoping this individual here is moving. Perfect. I was thinking if you're going to turn around and leave, that would really upset me. So let's throw over to you.
Well, thank you very much. We've been talking about the utility of technology, but nothing about the balance of the impact of those technologies on climate.
Could you come forward to the microphone just a bit more?
Sorry, we've been talking about the utility of technology, but not about the balance of that with climate. If you look at the example of space, and I work for the Space Command, my name's Ian, sorry, we've known about the ecological impact of space launch since the 80s, since the Montreal protocols, which banned CFCs. But we've ignored that because of the huge benefits of space. AI is incredibly energy intensive. Blockchain, mind-blowing energy intensity. Data, pretty much the same. Cloud computing is probably the only bright spot there, where things like AWS, Google are looking at carbon neutral cloud and really working to bring down the carbon cost of computing. I'd love to hear from the panel, how can we better balance the ecological impacts of technology with the utility of technology?
That's an excellent question. Before I go to you guys, let's take this second question over here, and we'll take a couple at one time, and then you can pick and choose what works for you.
Oh gosh, that's putting me on the spot earlier. I'm Michael Whitbrook from the University of Auckland. A lot of this discussion today and the discussion in this panel has been, it seems to me, perhaps focused on short-term technology impacts on society rather than longer term ones, such as, for example, the possibility of complete human labour replacement, right? And if you agree that that sort of level of change in the very underpinning of our society is possible, what can we start doing about that now? Another example of that is the realistic prospect of merging AI with natural computation in human brains, right? Using high bandwidth brain-computer interfaces. Again, looking like they're going to be possible sometime in the next 20 years. So how do we start at a international level designing solutions for these which are not couched in short-term international competition terms?
Yep, fantastic. Okay, number 3, and Jasmine, before you go, is there any questions? It is a bit bright at the back there. I can see someone with a microphone. No? Okay, great.
Jasmine, Australia India Youth Dialogue. I'm just kind of leveraging onto both of those points that have been raised in the 2 questions. I'm interested in the panel's views on the role of government in addressing this uneven impact of technology, where it's not just have and have-nots, but around degraded and dated technology that you have access to versus none at all, where we have automated decision-making impacted on people who don't have the financial, education and legal right of reply, and where the jobs that we create are highly skilled and accessible to higher socioeconomic, replacing jobs that are at the lower socioeconomic. Again, we think of driving. That's a use case for advanced technology in Australia. But if I take that to somewhere like rural India, that's actually an anti-use case because of where the jobs are actually removed from and their accessibility of education to move up the scale. So is this, again, something that the panel sees as a role of government, of regulation and standards? Or is this something we actually need to see industry and these global partnerships we've been talking about actually need to move in and lead because they're leading the innovation ecosystem?
Fantastic. Okay, we'll go back to the panel and they're going to decide what they take there. If anybody else wants to join in and do a second round, I'm very open to that. We could take 2 more from the floor, but let's start with those. So just really quick recap. Number 1, utility of tech, but we haven't talked enough about the balance there and some of the downsides there, so that's really important. Number 2 was about the short-term impacts of society rather than the long-term and a need to focus on those long-term impacts there. And then the last one there was about the role of government and that uneven impact of the tech and the socio-economic impact. So 3 very big questions. I might go this way instead because you started last for the last 2 rounds. So let's kick off with you and jump into the ones you wanted to focus on.
Well, first of all, thank you for this very important question. So this is something that I have been thinking about myself. But in terms of climate change, I think the issue for us is that there's certainly a role that government has to play because if you're very short-sighted, I mean, it doesn't really produce any profit. So that's the reason why we're working on it. But at the same time, like in Japan as well, we are under pressure to show the results of R&D more quicker than we used to be. So that is rather a challenge that we're facing. The climate change, it's very strong if you want to have a long-term prediction. That's one of the strengths. But if you don't show the results as quickly as possible, as before, we're under pressure. So, but if we keep on moving to work on these R&D, we hopefully benefit the public, the general public. So I'm rather happy to hear those questions.
Yeah. It's been in the Japanese media a lot, hasn't it? The past couple weeks, front pages. Our critical tech tracker got some good attention over there, which was fantastic and I think generated a bit of a debate.
That's right.
Dr. Brantner, let's move to you. You might want to jump across all 3 questions. I'll leave it to you to what works for you.
Yeah, I start with the first question, and I very much agree with you. We are working currently on space waste management. We have to be much better there. It's a huge challenge that we're trying to tackle also with regulation. And then you were talking about the energy use of AI, or as you said, blockchain is even worse. And of course, a lot of that goes back also on that we have no knowledge on the energy use of different AI models, or we know it. Like you can have an improvement by a few percentages, which increase the energy use by 200%. So sometimes you can make that judgment: is it worthwhile taking all that additional energy for that little bit of better model? But you as a consumer have no idea about this. So what we're working on, we're developing and funding as a government right now, is an energy label for software and AI models, so that you then can say, oh, I don't want to take that app, I don't want to take that AI model because it uses so much more energy. And today you have an app, whatever, a flower recognition app, and you get recommendations online in your app store, and it says, oh, this one gives you, you have like 4 hearts, and then it says, this one is not so nice, but you never know, so what's the energy impact of that? So we are about to developing energy labels for software, for apps, and AI models, because we think it's very critical that this becomes one dimension of consumer choices. And then we have now a law setting regulation, energy regulation for our servers in terms of energy efficiency, about using the heat that they generate for local heat consumption. So we have an entire package of energy efficiency standards now for servers in Germany. And there is much more to come. We're financing studies at the cross of climate and digitalization. We have set up systems for that for our small and medium-sized companies so that they can work on this as a joint challenge. So I don't know what's happening on that in Australia, no idea, but that's all what we're doing in Germany, just to let you know that for us that's a key concern. Second question on the long-term challenges. I think that's one that has been there forever, the question of what will be the human left in the labor force. In Germany, we have a huge challenge, which is labor shortage. So we're very happy about everything that can be automatized. So we're not afraid of losing jobs. We're afraid of not having enough people to do the jobs we actually have to do. So what our government is trying to do is to prioritize where we want to keep humans as the ones doing the jobs: education, elderly care, etc. And therefore, be careful about where we invest as a state funding to help complete, automatized systems, and where you still need people. And that goes to the last question in terms of, is that socially unfair? We in Germany see that in the energy transition, we need a lot of craftsmen, and we need a lot of people who do jobs that used to be sort of out of fashion in the past, that if you were a parent, you wanted your kid to study but not become a heat pump specialist. And now we're needing heat pump specialists. And they are making much more money than somebody who studied philosophy. So I think it's really turning upside down in terms of what are the valued jobs in a society. And I think we just have to be very pragmatic about it. And we are losing jobs as radiologists, for example, in the clinical areas, which used to be very highly paid jobs, and they're replaced by AI. And the error rate is much lower than of human beings. So there will be still radiologists in the future, but much fewer. And these used to be the highly trained, studied, very highly paid jobs, which are dying out. And on the other side, you're having craftsman jobs, which are really highly paid and everybody's looking for. So I'm not so sure which way this will go, the technology evolution. But all I can say is that, we in Germany, we have such a demography, and the same in Japan and many other countries, we are, everything that can be done artificially by computers, by robots, good.
Okay. I was just thinking, I'm quite terrified about what we might be talking about next year, actually, as you talk about the different sectors that really, could be obliterated in the next few years. And I do wonder, how prepared are we, right? I mean, Germany feels like...
We just have to make sure that we keep those jobs that we want to have with people, that they are kept with people. Yeah. And that it's not sort of random. And I think that will be important as a society together say, in the elderly care, that's what you can replace with robots, but we still want to have people to take care of our parents when they get old. Yeah. And so to make this financially viable, etc. So these are the difficult debates we're having in Germany about where's the, where do you still want to have a person?
Yeah. I feel like you guys are ahead, I think, of the rest of us in a way. I mean, that takes a lot of strategic planning. So it's fascinating that Germany is having that discussion. I don't think in Australia we're having that discussion enough.
Maybe you don't need to have that.
Yeah.
We need to have it.
Dulciana, over to you. We've got sort of 2 minutes left for both you and Honours in 2 minutes each.
Sure. I think I'll respond to the final question on the role of government, and it may touch on the two earlier questions. I guess I was broaching everything that I've said today in terms of the importance of economic performance to social development in a jurisdiction like ours. I think that we face, and the importance of long-term investment planning, I think if we're looking at solutions, sits right, squarely in balancing both of those, because we do have a two-speed economy, and we are, again, the biggest Pacific Island country in this region. So I feel that sometimes we compare apples with oranges when we're talking about PNG, but the importance of understanding a two-speed economy means that when you're looking at a greenfield like Wafi-Golpu, for instance, where we're now talking about a block cave mine, I guess a process and special mining lease arrangement where the state is about to sign up, where a block cave mine is all about robotics, what that means to our tax regime, what it means to employment, what it means to expertise, what it means to immigration, really is about this long-term investment planning. Now, if we don't have the helicopter view of our economy and understand that if we talk about sovereign wealth now, it actually captures, first of all, our constitutional protections of land and sea, but it also magnifies the importance of what sort of ancestors we want to be. And I think that the issue of the role of government, we've seen already that there are highly punitive pieces of legislation and regulation that have been employed in communications, in technology, and the unintended consequence of regulation and legislation means that the cost of or competition is not competition in when we look at telecommunications, for instance. There are many other issues that we can speak to, but I think the importance of understanding the long-term investment proposition is for us about understanding that at one level, if we're engaging in state negotiations, building out fiscal, legal and technical terms around our extractive resources, we do have to remember that we are in an underdeveloped economy, and that's 87% of the population who live in a geographic or complete lack of geographic proximity to in maritime and riverine areas where infrastructure that is important here or possible here is just impossible for us. So therefore the importance of the geospatial stuff. But again, it comes down to human negotiations. And who populates those spaces. We've got 118 people making decisions for 17 million people who we think we have, but we don't know because we haven't given data the prominence that it deserves. So it's a chicken and egg often
and that
issue.
Data point, I think, is really, really important about the quality of data. We have literally, it says 2 seconds, I'm going to give you 20. So really, I'm just looking for one last point before Nina's going to come on stage.
In one word, for question 2 and 3, education. Technology will never replace human, but human plus technology will replace human. Okay, so AI will never replace human, but human plus AI will replace human. Number one question, if I understand correctly, about the ecosystem. If you look, all the public cloud companies that you mentioned, they have declared they're going to be zero carbon by 2030, if I understand your question correctly. In terms of blockchain, Ethereum has moved from proof of work to proof of stake. That's less energy, like 99% saving at least. So that's my short answer.
Thank you, On. I really appreciate you keeping that short. Let's give a round of applause. What a fantastic and diverse panel here.